And with, before we move on to let our two remote members join, I want to remind our committee members, when we call for the motion and the second, please go to your iPad and make that motion and that second. That makes the voting go a little smoother. Now I need a motion to allow Dan Kelch and Paul Rosenbaum to join us remotely.
Just Paul.
Just Paul, I'm sorry. Dan won't be able to join. So do I have a motion? Betty, second? Sharon? Please place those motion and second on your iPad and please vote. Okay, I still have an engineering agreement. Got to do a little update here. There it is. A record of that somewhere.
It'll flash on the screen.
Somebody? Motion passed unanimously. Paul Rosenbaum, do we have you?
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Let's see, that would bring us to the approval of minutes for our January 27th meeting. We have a motion and a second to approve. Sharon and Marcia. Are there any changes and corrections to the minutes? Any additions, corrections, or deletions? Please vote. Motion carries unanimously, which will bring us to our next item. However, from your agenda, I've decided to depart and bring public comment up so that everybody doesn't have to wait for a long afternoon. We do have several, 5 to be exact, and I'm going to start in the order that they came in. Joyce Harant. I will remind you that only testimony or evidence that was presented at the Zoning Board of Appeals can be considered. So to the committee members, make sure you compare your notes from the Zoning Board. Go ahead. Look for a green light.
Okay,
There
thank
you
you. I'm Joyce Harant, and it came about my comments when I was trying to find information about the wind ordinance. And I'm putting my 45 years as legal and voters hat on in my comments here. And that's, I found the system, the committee, the website system for finding information really difficult for public participation. And I asked about this, and Mr. Braun from, I think, Planning responded. He said, only the agenda for the Zoning Board of Appeals is posted to the county website and web pages and calendar. Case summaries are published in the Peoria Journal-Star. And I might note that in both the the zoning appeals and this committee, the agenda item for the wind ordinance was unlabeled. It said Peoria County. The zoning documentation is available through submission of FOIA. Once a case moves on to the land use, the packet containing the case information is posted to the web. This is the case for all zoning cases, not just specifically the amendment in question. And then graciously, he attached the item I was looking for. So this means that the public really doesn't have any access to knowing what's on the agenda when it's unlabeled and has to go through a FOIA process. And if they miss it in the Peoria Journal-Star, a posting, they don't have any idea when it's going on. So I'm familiar with working with issues in the city of Peoria and other public bodies, and I was really taken back by this system that is really so unfriendly to the public getting access to information. All those links could have been active. People could have had access to the information. So that just basically, I am going to be bringing this up with the league to see if they are interested in talking with the county about this stuff. Thank you.
Our next public comment is from Joyce Blumenshine.
Thank you, Chairman. And the members of the committee. I'm here to just review quickly comments I made both in my letter and comments at the February 10th Zoning Board of Appeals, and then I did send a letter reiterating some concerns with that letter on February 23rd. The time frame for this process has moved to the public here pretty quickly, trying to keep up, and thankfully to the zoning office and board that there was the deferral to the February meeting. A couple comments. Number one, Heart of Illinois Sierra Club, in the interest of our over 300 people across the county, see the need for not only transparency but also what we have in our letter, and that is that the full considerations of this county are to comply with existing law and to represent the best interests for the county moving forward. And we see a full, fair, and very appropriate process for siting is critical. And that siting is to ensure safety for the public, but also for the best interests for the county for the future. And in my comments, I think I mentioned, as you all are aware, well aware of the tax benefits from wind and other developments, the benefits and the right to farmers to farm for wind, the right for people to utilize their property as they deem they need to within the restrictions of the codes of the county and laws. So in closing here, and just short reference to key points, which I did not feel were answered fully at the ZBA, and maybe that's because I just have not followed well enough, but I bring them to you today for your consideration. And those are in brief. Number one, lack of consistency in wording regarding the flicker timeline. It says in two places. One says no more than 30 hours. The other place says less than 30 hours. I feel the less than is not in compliance with the state statute. Another consideration regarding not in compliance with the state statute, which could leave the county vulnerable to lawsuits moving forward. And who knows, I'm not a lawyer, but whatever that entails financially, that is something to think about. So that is regarding what appears to be more restrictive uses of your ordinance, and that is requiring all of the road commission agreements before people file. That is handing your duly elected authority to vote on the ZBA and on the board and this land use committee to township road officials. If they decided not to be assisting in this process some way, they could stop it all. So I do thank you for your time, and I hope that you will take time today to reconsider this carefully. If there is a better way to approach this, I hope you will consider that, and whatever could be a logical solution to what I see as a lot of problems right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next testimony from Carson Robers.
Thank you all for the time and for the staff's dedicated work on the wind ordinance. I'm Carson Robers with the Four Creeks Wind Project. We're one of the proposed wind projects here in Peoria County and have been developing the project here since 2021 and have over 100 farm families participating in our project. I come to you with a simple request. Like, not everything in this draft ordinance I think is per se in compliance with state law or ideal for me as a wind developer. But the one change that I think is in the best interest of the county and reflected in our comments, both for the road districts at the township, county level, and otherwise, is to make it a building permit requirement. This would be a 2-word change to the text amendment that has been passed forward through the ZBA. And in doing so, this better aligns with both the state law and under which these road use agreements are not required, especially not required at this stage of applying for a special use permit. And also, once a project goes through the special use permit application process and the turbine locations, infrastructure locations are known, it is better timing to endeavor through all the road matters that we have to do before we construct any of these projects. Like, we won't be able to go out there without the overweight and oversized restrictions. And it may or may not be a road use agreement, but the timing of road use agreements is better served at the building permit stage, and it's a simple change that you as a committee can make to improve your ordinance, to reduce the risk of litigation, as well as to better serve the interest of Peoria County. Thank you.
Thank you, Carson. Our next comments are from Tracy Fox.
Hi, my name's Tracy Fox. I live in rural Chillicothe area, and I'm here today as a supporter of wind with Central Illinois Healthy Community Alliance and the Sierra Club. I am concerned that Peoria County wants to push forward a wind ordinance that goes well beyond the state statute. I think it includes a number of things that are just bad practice for writing or laws. First off, it contains some really specific technology mandates in the area of aviation, something that Peoria County has no expertise in. I don't think it strikes a good balance between the rights of property owners and the 100 family farmers who stand to benefit from these wind projects and concerned citizens who are rabidly anti-wind, even though no one's forcing them to have it on their own property. And finally, it doesn't show good knowledge or alignment with the way that big projects are typically developed. And I know that in the development of the state statute, those things were all specifically tried to avoid and tried to set up a framework that would help counties avoid them. And I'm concerned both about the projects that have already been proposed, but also about the message that Peoria County could be sending going forward. When you have a lot of extraneous requirements, when you have places that built in delay, we become less attractive to wind development projects. And in today's economic climate, with all the uncertainty about how our schools are going to be funded, about how our roads are going to be funded if the federal share becomes reduced, I think we should be looking at ways to build revenue and to build jobs for union labor here in the county. I have always fought for not just cleaning up pollution and doing things in ways that were better for the environment, but also for things that brought benefits to union families and also for things that help reduce the pollution burden on the poorest and the least advantaged in our country. And I mean, I think that wind energy is an example of where we can do good at multiple levels. Specifically speaking to the ordinance, I was concerned that developers might find it unfriendly that Peoria County is needing to layer on communications with the NTIA, as well as mandate a very specific type of aircraft detection lighting system. Wouldn't the FAA be a better place for that to happen if it was indeed necessary? I don't really understand why Peoria County would be involved in that. And why, when the state calls for 2 wildlife consultations, does Peoria County need to layer on a 3rd? Clearly, that's an overreach from what the state statute mandates. Also, why are they asking for engineering certifications on equipment related to the type of things that the FCC regulates? I'm talking about microwave interference and different things like that. That goes well beyond Peoria County's expertise and its purview, and it is not required in the state statute. Also, I believe that most firms wouldn't guarantee the sorts of things that your statute asks for. Your car company isn't going to guarantee that your car will never break down. Your refrigerator company isn't going to guarantee that it will always make ice. They'll give you a warranty and they'll try to do the best they can, but some of the demands in the statute are quite extreme. And finally, as a final example, in the area of flicker, they require that the companies do modeling to ensure that flicker remains within the state statute. And I think that's great. But then Peoria County layers on a requirement that says even though your model shows that you didn't do any flicker, that you're not going to cost flicker in excess of a certain number of hours, you still have to do analysis and develop all kinds of plans of how you're going to correct it if you encounter a condition that your modeling said you're not going to encounter. It's just the kind of roadblock that when developers are scouting out where they want to do a project, they're going to cross Peoria County off the list. And I'm concerned that all these delays and all these additional steps are also going to add to the cost of these projects. And I believe wind companies are pretty savvy operators. I don't think those costs are going to come out of their bottom line. I think they're going to come out of the payments that are made to Peoria County landowners, the hourly wages of union folks, and the number of Peoria suppliers that get involved. That's who's going to lose because of all these delays that aren't based in any science, aren't based on any expertise, and just add on and add legal exposure to the county. And finally, I just want to speak out and say that I think it's important that in an uncertain environment that we continue to move forward. Solar has served Peoria County well, and I think wind will serve us well as well. So I hope that you will stay the course and remain committed to these projects that are so important to farm families, to union workers, and to citizens concerned about a clean, healthy, and reliable source of energy. Thanks.
Thank you, Tracy. And our final remarks, I'll apologize in advance if I pronounce this incorrectly and hope that you'll correct me when you come to the microphone. Janaki Nair? Not the first
Thank
time
you.
you've heard that.
Janaki Nair. It's not the
Nair.
easiest.
Not even close.
I'm an attorney, and I'm working with and represent Cross Creek Farms, Inc., which is a member of the citizens group No to Peoria County Windmills. Mostly, I just wanted to introduce myself and make myself available. If anybody has questions, I'd be happy to address them. I did want to commend the county and the Zoning Board of Appeals for the efforts that they made to put together the proposed text amendment, taking into account so much feedback we all had for them. They really did a terrific job of trying to bring everybody together and come up with an ordinance that works for all parties. Obviously, we still have qualms about some of the provisions, and we made the record at the Zoning Board of Appeals. We think that there's maybe one provision that I'm going to mention in my public comment here that we would still like to see revised, and it's in the section that calls for no significant changes to be made to an application once it's been filed and there's a hearing proceeding. There's a carve-out from the rule that there be no significant changes if those changes are made in response to comments and things at the hearing. Our concern is that if a substantial modification is made, even at the hearing, and the individuals who might be affected by that modification haven't been given notice of the new conditions, that they're being deprived of their opportunity to participate in the hearing. So a significant modification, for example, would be moving where a windmill might go. That could make a big impact on somebody who, let's say, was farther away from it as proposed, and then in the course of the hearing, it moves closer to that family, that house. And these are the size of skyscrapers, so it's a big deal if that moves in next door to you and you weren't expecting it. So we would ask, and it's in 7.2.2.1b, that once the siting approval application and public hearing process has begun, that no material changes be allowed to be made, regardless of what might motivate those changes, because we believe that deprives the citizens of the opportunity to appear at and speak at the hearing. So other than that one change, we do, again, thank you for all of your work on this, and we just incorporate our comments from the zoning board, and I'd say thank you to you all.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for your comments. That's going to take us back to the original order of our agenda, and namely two informational items. The first being the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission minutes. I'm understanding that there are no new minutes, and I don't believe we have anybody here from that group. Okay, that would take us to unsafe structures, and Andrew Braun, our zoning director.
A copy of the unsafe structures report that is provided monthly is included in your packet. I just want to note that in the last year, we've demolished 9 unsafe structures utilizing grant funding from the Illinois Housing Development Authority. We do still have funding for 1 unsafe structure under that grant. So if there are members who have concerns about properties in their districts. All right, try that again. A copy of the unsafe structure report is included in your packets. Each month we present to you the running list. We use that list to apply for grant funding. We knocked down 9 houses last year that were deemed unsafe through the courts, and we have funding remaining for 1 additional home. If any members have structures in their districts they'd like us to take a look at, we're happy to do so. It's a tedious process, but it is something that is very valuable to those members who have been part of it. So if there's any questions about the unsafe structure report, I'm happy to answer those.
Any questions for Andrew? We'll move on to development summary.
Thank you. This is a monthly report that identifies new single-family residential construction as well as non-residential construction, and then gives a summation of all the permit activity. I'll note that because it's early in the year, February and January are generally very light months due to the weather. Solar permits are down at this point compared to years past, but we'll kind of look to rebound here in March and April as the weather breaks.
Any questions for Andrew on the development summary?
Mr. Rulon,
Yes.
I do just want to, there was a permit in there for Cat Edwards, and if anybody's been following, that's I think the second one for major upgrades and what Cat's been doing down at the Riverfront Museum and the AH building. Cat has been for people that are down on Peoria, Cat has been investing considerable amount of money into their facilities in the Peoria area. So I just want to say it's noticed, appreciated from this board member, plus not even what they've been investing out in Mossville at those facilities, but they have been dumping a considerable amount of time, talent, and money into their facilities around here.
Thank you, Chairman Dillon. I noticed it myself and was excited to see that as well. Anybody else? Comments or questions for Andrew? Okay, moving on. I believe Administrator Sorrell is handling a strategic plan update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you'll find the quarterly strategic plan update in your packet. There's just really, I believe, one item that comes before the Land Use Committee. So that update is in there for you. Just a reminder that on Saturday, March 22nd, the board will convene for a strategic planning update. There will be a discussion about things we can check the box as complete, and discussion about priorities you want to add to the list. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments on strategic plans from Administrator Sorrell? That will bring us on to our action items. Resolutions and zoning cases, the first of which is ZBA 2025-0007, petition of Waterleaf Solar. And I expect we'll get our introduction from, again, from Andrew Braun. Oh, I need a motion and a second to get him on the floor. Chairman Dillon, and a second from Betty Duncan.
All right, this is the petition of Waterleaf Solar, LLC. Waterleaf is an affiliate of Cultivate Power, who is represented today by Angela Ferrier. She's in the audience to answer any questions you might have. They are requesting to construct and operate a 5-megawatt commercial solar energy facility across 22 acres of an existing 65.29-acre parcel. This development has the potential to power approximately 1,000 homes. The proposed solar farm will connect to the Harmon substation, which is located approximately 3.55 miles to the northwest. The subject parcel is located on the north side of West Middle Road and is located directly across Middle Road from Peoria International Airport in Limestone Township. The subject parcel is zoned A2 and consists of a single-family dwelling, an agricultural field, and timber. The owner of the property will continue to live on site. Adjacent properties are zoned I2 industrial to the north and A2 to east, south, and west. The nearest single-family dwelling on a non-participating property is approximately 776 feet to the east. There are 0 consents and 0 objections on file. There was a letter from the FAA, the Federal Aviation Authority, included in the application, which stated no objection, provided the structures do not exceed 7 feet. According to the petition, the solar arrays will not be more than 4 feet. Section 7.17.3 addresses the minimum conditions for a special use permit for a commercial solar energy facility, and the petitioner's application demonstrates that these standards will be met. Commercial solar energy facilities are also required to have a decommissioning plan pursuant to the requirements of the Illinois Department of Agriculture's Standard Solar Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement, acronym known as AMA. The petitioner submitted the executed AMA for the project with the special use application. The Zoning Board of Appeals recommended approval by a vote of 4-1. Staff recommended approval with 8 restrictions. The petitioner did request at the hearing, as well as submit a letter to members of the Land Use Committee requesting that restriction number 7 be amended to allow development to commence within 4 years rather than the recommended 3. Did recommend to stay with the 3-year period. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Does anyone have any questions for Andrew? Andrew, I do have one question on this. The restrictions that your office is recommending, we've seen, I believe, these same ones before. Does this include the restrictions that were recently placed in January regarding reporting and in the event of a sale of the property?
Yes, sir. Those will be standard restrictions moving forward. We are communicating that to all developers as they contact our office. I mentioned that this was an affiliate of Cultivate Power, so they will be restricted to Cultivate Power and its businesses. It will not be transferable. Should they be acquired, certainly that business would then take on the rights, but it is non-transferable. The period for construction is 3 years, and then they must submit in perpetuity an annual list of officers or contact information. So we'll continue to place those restrictions or recommend those restrictions are placed on all solar cases moving forward.
Any other questions or discussion for Andrew? Chairman Dillon?
Chairman Ruin, just for clarification, Andrew, you just have to have the permit in the 3 years. You do not have to be completed within the 3 years, correct?
That's correct. The issue date of the permit must be 3 years from the date of approval by the Peoria County Board.
Yeah. So just for clarification, it does not have to be built in 3 years. You just have to file for a permit within the 3 years. And that is one of our new stipulations, which I know they're asking for a variance, and I think that has to do with getting in the queue for being able to apply. But at 3 years, that's plenty of time, and I think we need to remain consistent with that since we just put that restriction on last month, where, again, we have quite a few out there that have no restrictions, and we're seeing the fruits of that.
Any other questions? Discussion? If not, please vote. Motion carried unanimously. I need a motion for the next zoning case. This will be, let me find a number here, ZBA 2025-0008, Ode or Odie Solar LLC. I'm not pronouncing that right, I apologize. We have a motion and a second to put that on the floor. Sharon Williams and Betty Duncan.
Thank you.
Andrew?
This is the petition of Ode Solar. I made the same enunciation at the Zoning Board of Appeals. Ode Solar is an affiliate of Cultivate Power, who once again is represented today by Angela Ferrier. They are requesting to construct and operate a 1.2 megawatt commercial solar energy facility across 9.5 acres of an existing 40-acre parcel. The proposed solar farm will connect to the Alta substation, which is located approximately 2.18 miles to the northeast. The petitioner had testified that the site was originally intended to be larger. However, Ameren restricted them to 1.2 megawatts. The subject parcel is located on the west side of North Trigger Road, between Grange Hall Road to the north and Chalacombe Road to the south. This property has been pre-annexed by the Village of Dunlap. A consent letter from the village dated 12/11/24 was submitted as part of the application, allowing them to move forward with the county. The subject parcel is zoned A2 and consists of an agricultural field. Adjacent parcels are also zoned A2. The nearest single-family dwelling on a non-participating property is approximately 300 feet to the east. There are a series of residential properties on this side of Grange Hall Road to the south. The petitioner has indicated that a vegetative landscaping buffer yard will be installed along Grange Hall, as well as the southeastern portion of the property, to aid in providing screening from those residences. There were 0 consents and 5 objections on file. Those objections were submitted in advance of the hearing with no specifics on what the issues were. One objector, however, did speak at the hearing and was concerned that the owner of the property was not local. Section 7.17.3 addresses the minimum conditions for a special use permit for a commercial solar energy facility, and the petitioner's application demonstrates that these standards will be met. Commercial solar energy facilities are also required to have a decommissioning plan pursuant to the requirements of the Illinois Department of Agricultural Standard Solar Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement. The petitioner submitted the executed AMA for this project with the special use application. The Zoning Board of Appeals recommended approval by a vote of 5-0. Staff recommended approval with 8 restrictions. And once again, the petitioner did request at the hearing, as well as submit a letter to members of the Land Use Committee requesting that restriction number 7 be amended to allow for development to commence within 4 years rather than the 3-year proposed language. The ZBA's recommendation included the 3-year period. Happy to entertain any questions.
Questions for Andrew? Seeing none, please vote. I need to ask you, do we have Paul Rosenbaum up here? I'm not. Yeah, he is voting the iPad. Okay. In case you're wondering and you were at the earlier meeting, we had voice votes from our remote attendees. Paul is using the iPad from his location to vote. So Member Rosenbaum is counted and motion carries unanimously. Which takes us to ZBA 2025-0009, petition of Kickapoo CSG1 LLC. Andrew?
Thank you. This is the petition of Kickapoo.
I'm sorry. I'm a rookie at this. I need a motion and a second to bring the resolution to the floor. Chairman Dillon and Marcia McCann. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the petition of Kickapoo CSG1 LLC. This is an affiliate of Dimension Power, who is represented by Kale Skagen in the audience today. They are requesting to construct and operate a 4.95 megawatt commercial solar energy facility across 26.5 acres of an existing 31.43 acre parcel. This development has the potential to power approximately 1,200 homes, and the proposed solar farm will connect to the Radnor substation. The proposal includes 3 parcels. The first is a 1.26 acre parcel to be used for access to Route 150. The second is a 1.57 acre parcel, which will connect the access to the parcel cited for development. The third is the 31.43 acre parcel currently in row crop production where the solar panels will be located. I will note that the 1.26 acre parcel that will be used for access does contain a residence where one of the owners resides. Adjacent parcels are also zoned A2. The nearest single-family dwelling on a non-participating property is approximately 475 feet to the west. There are 1 consent and 2 objections on file. I'll describe those objections. One objection came from an adjacent property owner to the north. He owned a farm across the street. He had concerns regarding drainage and a box culvert that has historically lacked maintenance. The petitioner's application included correspondence with IDOT, which gave preliminary approval and specifically referenced what they called the crossroad culvert, and that it would need to be taken into consideration during design and review. The second objection was in regard to the potential or lack of potential to utilize local labor. Section 7.17.3 addresses the minimum conditions for a special use permit for a commercial solar energy facility, and the petitioner's application demonstrates that these standards will be met. Commercial solar energy facilities are also required to have a decommissioning plan pursuant to the requirements of the Illinois Department of Agriculture's Standard Solar Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement. The petitioner submitted the executed AMA for the project with the special use application. The Zoning Board of Appeals recommended approval by a vote of 4-1. Staff recommended approval with 8 restrictions.
I do have one. Andrew, the drainage and box culvert situation, is our process sufficient to guarantee that those are either in the hands of the highway department or the township road commissioner, so they will be addressed?
Yeah. Yes, as a condition of the building permit, you'll need to get a road access permit. That will come from the Illinois Department of Transportation, as Route 150 is a state route. And so what they've indicated is that the design will have to take into consideration whether that's adequate or whether it will need to be improved in order for this development to occur.
Other questions for Andrew? Seeing none, please vote. Motion carried unanimously, which takes us to our final resolution. ZBA 2025-0006, petition of Peoria County. Andrew, I'm sorry. No, wait. I need a motion and a second to bring this to the floor. Chairman Dillon and Betty Duncan. Thank you. Andrew.
All right, thank you. This is a text amendment to amend Chapter 20 of the Unified Development Ordinance. Specifically, we're looking at Article 3, Section 3.5, which is special use permits. Article 7, Section 7.2, commercial wind energy facilities. And Article 11, Section 11.1, definitions. I'm joined by our special counsel, Andy Kite from Heil Royster. Planning and Zoning and the State's Attorney's Office have been working with Andy and his team for months to develop these ordinance regulations. I'll note that last year, case ZBA 2024-002 amended the Unified Development Ordinance to bring us into compliance with Public Act 103-0580. And so these are further amendments. Much like we've done with solar, we will revisit these as it is seen fit. There was far more interest this go around than there was a year ago today. So the first draft was drafted in October of last year. So just a little bit of history. This is not something that did pop up overnight. We initially had this case published for the January 9th, 2025 Zoning Board of Appeals. The night before, literally the 23rd hour, we received some public comments. So much so that we didn't have time to review them. We then received additional comments that morning. So it was the recommendation that we go back and take a look at those and see if there was something that should be considered from those public comments. So prior to making any type of amendments, we then received additional comments. So these comments are coming from public interest groups. They're coming from the private sector. They're coming, the developer. They're coming from Heart of Illinois Sierra Club. They're coming from the Stop Windmills or Say No to Windmills group. So we wanted to make sure that everybody's comments were incorporated into this ordinance. We can't please everybody, but we can do our best to ensure that all parties feel represented. So we did multiple rounds of outreach. And what I mean by that is we had WebEx meetings in addition to phone calls where attorneys from these parties were represented. We talked through each and every point that was made in each and every letter. We had one on February 3rd, and following the February 3rd, Andy and myself scrambled to put together a draft 2 of the ordinance proposal. We then redistributed that, and then on February 10th, we had a second WebEx meeting. There were additional comments at that February 10th meeting. However, the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting was scheduled for February 13th, and in the interest of time, we had to have a cutoff date. So we felt that we did accommodate all interested parties in allowing for their comments to be made, but unfortunately, unless we intend to continue, there will continue to be comments that will be made at meetings such as this. So the citizens group, Four Creeks, and Apex, their comments were all incorporated. The version of the amendments that was passed out to the Zoning Board of Appeals was color-coded to ensure that everyone could see that where those comments were coming from. The version that's included in your packet is a clean version. So I just want to note that. So Section 3.5 was an amendment to what was previously called the approval standards. It was the position of one of the comments that if we label them as approval standards, we're essentially saying if you meet these standards, everything will be approved. So we have revised that language to now read as the review standards. So it's not to say that if you meet those standards, it will be approved, but those are the standards for which review will be conducted based on. So the following factors shall be considered as a balancing test, not one of which shall be controlling. We also amended our standards in general. So for as long as I've been a part of Peoria County, 2007, we've utilized the standards for approval, and they were fivefold. We have stricken those to incorporate what are called the LaSalle-Sinclair factors. And the LaSalle-Sinclair factors have been around since 1957 and are the standards for review at the Illinois Supreme Court level. And so we felt that that was being more consistent with what was done at the state level, much like the remainder of the wind ordinance and solar ordinances for that matter, must be in compliance with those state standards. So should this case or proposed case or potential case escalate to the state level, we will be using the same standards that the state would then be ultimately using.
Is there any questions, comments for Andrew or for Andy Kite, or council on the ordinance changes?
There are more ordinance
Oh,
changes.
I'm sorry.
That is just section 3.5.
Oh, you paused just long enough to make me think you were done.
Section 7.2 is specific to commercial and wind energy facilities. And in general, what we attempted to do, and I will say that I feel that we did, was make sure that we were consistent with our language throughout our ordinance, consistent with the state of Illinois' language, and then consistent with the historical position of Peoria County. And what I mean by that is that we want to ensure that we have as much information in front of staff, in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and in front of the public as possible prior to bringing a case forward. So you'll note that in all of our solar cases, we had all sorts of approvals that were required. We had executed agreements with the state of Illinois, and they were all submission requirements. So we are aligning this ordinance with the same, not being overly restrictive or more restrictive than the state. There's a position, I would call it an interpretation, that we are being more restrictive than the state, but it is our position and our interpretation through planning and zoning, the state's attorney's office, and our outside counsel that we are certainly in compliance with any regulations the state has set forth. So we have added language regarding aircraft detection lighting systems. Those are going to be the blinking red lights that appear on the wind turbines in the event an aircraft gets within a specific proximity. This was a recommendation from the Citizen Interest Group, and this was a proposal that was accepted by the development group. So those three parties were all in favor, or at least not opposed to this language being added. We have added a state historic preservation study. I will say that was omitted previously, but that was a state requirement, and so it was brought to our attention that it was missing. We've also added a state protected lands avoidance requirement. Once again, that was included in the state's language, and so we've added that. We've just added some clarification to the implementation timelines. So in some cases it says the project prior to public hearing before the Zoning Board of Appeals. Does that mean 8:45, or does that mean being that the Zoning Board of Appeals meets at 9 a.m., or does that truly mean at the time of application? So we've attempted to clarify that so there's no interpretation as to what that means. I think a lot of this ordinance and a lot of the debate is in regards to interpretation, and if it's not specifically addressed within an ordinance, then who is to say what the interpretation was meant to be? So we have some cases where the required approval shall be submitted as part of the application. We have some cases where the required approval shall be submitted as part of the building permit application, and we have some cases where it's subject to the county board's approval. We've clarified how height is determined, and that's based on blade tip height. And then there's also a clarification, specifically I want to call out, where the road use agreement clarifies identification of roads used during construction. We've asked for that as part of the special use application. That is different than the road use agreement. That's strictly identifying what roads will be used. Now, within the ordinance, we have minimum submittal requirements for a special use permit application. The big one that I'll note is clarifies when an application is complete. So there's an argument that it says, the state says that once we have received a completed application, we have a specific number of days to act on that application at the county board level. Whether an application is complete is not the same as whether the application, to one, a completed application could be 3 pages. To another, it could be 1,200 pages. So we just want to make sure that it's clarified that an application is deemed complete when it has been filed. When it's gone through the pre-application process, when it's been adequately vetted and reviewed by staff, and in this case, outside counsel, and we've put that file stamp on it and scheduled it for the Zoning Board of Appeals. That is a complete application. It defines a material change to an application, and specifically material changes shall include but not be limited to wind turbine heights, the number of proposed turbines, overall nameplate capacity, wind turbine manufacturers and specific models, wind turbine nameplate capacity, wind tower parcel locations, supporting facility locations, and or supporting facility dimensions, and a reduction of any of the foregoing shall not constitute a material change. That last sentence is key because, as with a variance, if you wanted to build a building and you came before our zoning board of appeals and said, I want to be 10 feet from a side property line, you would not have to come back to the zoning board of appeals if you wanted to be 12 feet because you're not increasing your request. So in this scenario, if you say, I want to build a 650-foot tower and the board approves it, if they come back and that tower is 625 feet, that is not then considered a material change. It is less than what was originally reviewed. It is less than what is originally approved. So I just want to make note of that. If you were to increase, there would be a series of approvals that are necessary. But in this scenario, it is a reduction of any of the foregoing shall not constitute a material change. So we have clarified the materials to be submitted as part of your Federal Aviation Authority, FAA, compliance. We have identified who may conduct an avian and bat study and the supplemental information which is required. We've identified specific types of analysis for shadow flicker. We've added certification requirements for interference determinations. We've clarified that road use agreements must be executed prior to submission. We've updated the noise level certification to then ask for sound modeling. And then we've replaced our decommissioning plan language that was specific to the Peoria County ordinance to meet the requirements and reference to the Department of Agriculture's Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement. You'll notice with the solar, I continuously referenced that they had an executed agreement with the state. So the state does require for wind as well an executed decommissioning plan an executed agricultural impact mitigation agreement. And so we felt that by taking out the specificities on what needed to be in there and referring back to the state will be consistent on that playing field as well. We've clarified some of our requirements for building permit and post-construction reporting. So we do outline the submittals that are required for a building permit, which include the decommissioning plan and the decommissioning agreement. The decommissioning agreement is one that will come back before the board for their approval, and that outlines the financial security components. Maintenance and operation delineates a specific date and material required for annual inspections, interference determinations, and fire risk. So on an annual basis, they will have to report back to the county to ensure that we have copies of those reports indicating that those have been inspected, that interference continues to not create continues to not be created on adjacent or other properties, and that fire risks are mitigated. It requires annual compliance for noise levels, and then requires an annual compliance certification or affidavit on maintenance and operation. So it's not just that the board is approving the wind farm, it's that we, year after year, are asking for copies of the reports to ensure that it's still being operated as it was intended to be. Definitions are strictly really clerical, copying from the state or making sure that everything is as clear as possible. I don't know that there's anything specific to note there. I will just touch base briefly on some of the comments perhaps that were made. The road use agreement timing has always been in this position. Since the original inception of this ordinance, we've asked for the road use agreement at the time of the special use application submittal. There's been an argument or an interpretation that states that the state of Illinois is saying if there's a road use agreement, you must meet these requirements. They're clearly, with using that terminology and allowing for road use agreements, there's nothing specifically that says they're prohibited. There's nothing specifically that says we cannot require it. So we feel it's in the best interest of the county and, once again, our due diligence to have those agreements hashed out in advance of application and in advance of hearing, so that when we come to our public hearing, all that information is available. What roads are being used? How are those roads being used? How will they be repaired? When will they be repaired? By who will they be repaired? You know, all the components that go into the road use agreement that ultimately the road official having jurisdiction over the road, whether that be the township, whether that be the county, whether that be the state, or perhaps even the city, will have the opportunity to work on. So we feel it's in the best interest of the county to leave it in the position that it is. I understand the concerns of some of the other groups, but we wanted to protect the public hearing process and make sure that those it's not negotiated on the floor at the Zoning Board of Appeals, and rather that it's in advance of any hearing. So I guess I will turn it back to the board for any questions. Once again, I'm joined by Andy. He is a subject matter expert and has represented countless municipalities and counties across the state of Illinois in wind hearings. And so we're very lucky that he has joined our team on a consultant basis. He's our person.
Any questions for Andrew or Andy, legal counsel for Peoria County? Marcia.
I have a question regarding the road use portion of it. When you have other projects, are the road use requirements the same as with this project? You know, if it had nothing to do with a wind turbine or anything of that nature, would a road use agreement have all the similar requirements?
So within the Unified Development Ordinance, road use agreements are absent. So we do not have a requirement anywhere else. That is something that, as part of a building permit, you would have to have a permit from the road jurisdiction. And those road jurisdictions have their own ordinances. So the county would be involved on a county highway. They would go to the Peoria County Highway Department. They would get their building permit or their road access permit. They'd be required to submit any number of pieces of information. The same goes for townships. Now, the state of Illinois does have set rules and regulations. So you'll see posted roads or unposted roads. Essentially, the road use agreement is identifying what the circumstances are for those rules or regulations that are over and above. So if in Illinois you can bring an 80,000 pound truck on any road, or under 80,000 pounds on any road at any time unless it's posted, these materials, these vehicles, they're going to be well in excess of those 80,000 pounds. So the county and the jurisdictions are ensuring that those roads are protected from that heavy load or from that seasonal use of the road. And so it's not contrary to other rules that exist. It's just unique in the sense of it's specific to this in where it's called out in the ordinance.
Any other questions for Andrew? Chairman Dillon.
Thank you, Chairman Rule. I just wanted to comment on the fact that we are very lucky to have Mr. Kite, who is a Peoria County resident who spent numerous years on this very own ZBA board as a public servant hearing these cases. His record has been from traveling across the state of Illinois, probably to much chagrin of his wife and family of being gone for multiple nights, but to have him representing us in this is kudos to just how the state's attorney Hoos and Jenny have always done and got us the best. So these are no undue requirements that we're asking. I also believe partly any deal that has everybody a little bit upset of they didn't get 100% is probably a good deal. And this is what they have taken to give to us, and that will work out well for us to go forward. I do know even similar to solar projects that we had, Trajectory and some others would always comment, these are not undue circumstances. We're just requiring them up front. They're going to have to do these no matter what happens. We are just requiring them to be done up front. It takes a little bit more legwork, a little bit more preparation, but they're not undue circumstances that we're asking for. So all in all, I think it's a great ordinance. Kudos to the time that was put into it, and I trust our attorney at the state's attorney's office and our outside counsel, Mr. Kite, and again, the top-notch ZBA office across the state, from Kathy to now Andrew in that leadership role. You guys have done a remarkable job, so thank you.
Any more questions for Andrew or Councilor Kite?
I do. I'll be short and brief. I just want to agree with everything Jimmy just said. He said it very eloquently and very precisely of everything that our staff and our council and outside council has done. We're looking out for our citizens, and I think it's like Jimmy says, if everybody isn't getting 100% on all the sites, we probably did a pretty good job on it. So kudos to everybody, and I appreciate all the hard work you put into it.
Thank you, Member Rosenbaum. Member Sulzer?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm new to this committee, of course, and I remember one huge zoning case we had was when PDC was trying to increase the size of their landfill there in Pottstown and so forth, and it went on for quite a while and huge amount of money and so forth. And I know I've had calls and so forth. I had calls at that time, I should say, and I'd always have to ask. I didn't know whether a person was correct and so forth. Do both of you feel that we are definitely in compliance with the state in regard to what we are proceeding with?
I'll defer to my legal counsel here, but I would say yes.
Yes. So one thing to keep in mind is as you can imagine, when the state passed their statute back in January of 2023, there's a lot of holes to it. There's some vagueness to that statute. So a lot of the counties and us attorneys that do this, we have to make our best judgment as to make it our ordinances as compliant as we can, taking into account that statute does have some gray to it. Okay. So yes, I think we're as compliant as we can be, given the vagueness that's in the statute, but our ordinance is as strong as you're going to get it. There was a lot of back and forth with those groups that were interested in the ordinance. As you can imagine, it's impossible to make an ordinance when there's competing interests that satisfies everybody's interests, right? So we try to make an ordinance that complies with the statute, number one. Number two, protects our citizens, but then also number three, takes into account all of the comments that came in on both sides of the issue. To the extent that you hear debate back and forth about people who say, well, maybe it's more restrictive, oftentimes that's in the area where there's that gray of whether or not the statute really regulates that specific issue or not. So I think our ordinance is compliant. I think our ordinance is as strong as you can get it. So to answer your question, yes. That was the long-winded lawyer answer.
Thank you. And another one, as we went through, and I listened to you, they're like on, I think it's 7-212 or something. I can't remember the exact code definition, but and they talk about township road commissioners. Township road commissioners, can they shut this project down?
They can. So the requirement right now is that the road use agreement in relation to the project, those agreements would have to be in place before they can file their special use permit application. Some counties hold that and make it a building permit application requirement. Ultimately, from a legal risk perspective, it doesn't really matter either way, but one thing to keep in mind is the statute doesn't give us any guidance. So the statute from the state doesn't tell us you have to have it as part of the building permit or you have to have it as part of the special use. Now, we've always felt, Peoria County has always felt that it's best, and it's always been this way in your ordinance, to make that a pre-special use application requirement. So the township can't hold it up. If they did that, there is legal recourse that a developer could take. So the township can't hijack the process and say, we're not going to agree to any sort of road use agreement. If they did that, the developer would have some sort of legal recourse to do that. One thing to keep in mind in the road use is we have to keep it moving. So as one of the agreements that was in the prior committee was the agreement to retain Hutchison Engineering. And then there's also tomorrow a reimbursement agreement in relation to the negotiation of the road use agreement. And so it's incumbent upon all the parties, county included, to keep the road use agreement discussion moving forward to an endpoint so that at some point they would then have the ability to apply for the special use.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other question from committee members? If not, I have a few, and we'll handle it a little bit like a lightning round. Is it the intention with this ordinance change that the county will pursue a road use agreement, an overlying road use agreement?
Yes, so each developer, when they come, they would have to negotiate a road use agreement. It's incumbent on us to negotiate that with them as well.
And how many townships are affected by this soon-to-be application?
The Four Creeks one, I believe there's 4.
And is it your experience that that townships have a budget legal to hire an attorney like yourself to help them negotiate a road use agreement?
They do, but typically what happens is on the township side is you have a reimbursement agreement where the costs of the township to hire that attorney ultimately get reimbursed by the developer in that negotiation process.
But is it logical then that if the county were to create a road use agreement, as we just approved funding for, that the townships could adopt that same or similar, very similar road use agreement, saving themselves perhaps 4 times the amount of money that's going to have to be spent on creating road use agreements individually?
They could, keeping in mind though that sometimes there are separate issues that need to be addressed within a township versus a county. Sometimes, just by way of example, county might have a bridge issue where a township doesn't. There may be turns or additional access that needs to be created for a township road versus a county road. So you can, it's not uncommon for all those agreements to be rolled into one agreement where it's the county plus all the townships. But it's also not uncommon for each individual entity, the county, each individual township to also have their own road use agreement. So it just is, they could adopt ours and just use it as a template if they wanted to.
So it seems like perhaps there's some efficiency in having the county pursue this up front rather than adding what could be a more lengthy process of, at time of permit application, have to go out and negotiate as many as 4 separate agreements in addition to the county one.
I'm not sure. What I would say to that is I don't think it really matters whether you're positioning it before the SUP or the building permit for that specific issue. The legal risk really remains the same regardless of whether it's before the special use or at the building permit stage. That's all. But most counties do it as a building permit. There are counties, though, that do have it as a special use permit requirement. But they can. I mean, in terms of negotiating, a township is always free to just take what the county's done and just adopt it if they want to do that.
It strikes me that the county's asset and our ability to bring together the expertise of a highway department as well as an attorney well-versed like you, we're protecting our township, not only the officers, but the taxpayers in every township from having to do this on their own. That's all my questions. Anybody else have questions for Andrew or Andy? Seeing none, please vote. We talked long enough. Your app may have timed out, so a refresh may be ordered necessary to to open voting? Okay. The resolution is passed unanimously. And since we've completed public comment to this point, takes us to miscellaneous. I'll start with Member Selzer. Miscellaneous. Backtracking to Chairman Dillon. Any miscellaneous comments right around the horseshoe? Member McCann? If not, meeting adjourned.